Her husband, a 19-year veteran sergeant from the NYPD, died by suicide. She's here to tell her story of what happened that day, life afterwards, and her life-saving mission today. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. It's free. And get the latest crime and law enforcement news on the Newsbreak app. It's simple, easy, and free. Just download the Newsbreak app. Then search for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Calling us from the New York City area, we have MaryAnn McGinnis on the phone. MaryAnn, thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's also something I've been very anxious about. I have not wanted to do this interview whatsoever. I've done them before, and it's just, I'm going to let people know right now, this is a really tough topic to talk about. For me personally, but for the grace of God, there go I, and it is a huge problem. Your husband, an NYPD veteran, died by suicide, correct?
Yes, correct.
And that's a term that I had a survivor explain to me, that it was preferred to use that term. I hope it is one that works okay for you. You know what I don't like about this conversation, MaryAnn, besides everything, is it brings out my cowardice. There's certain things that I have no problem doing. But when it comes to talking to survivors of those who died in line of duty or died by suicide, I'm an absolute coward, and I'm so afraid of saying the wrong thing.
I understand. Thank you.
And a good friend of mine whose husband worked for me for years before I got transferred was shot and killed in line of duty, and she said, hey, the worst has already happened. You can't make it worse. The worst thing you can do is just ignore me and lock me out and not talk to me.
That's the truth.
So this is a tough conversation. Let's go into, before we tell your story, let's talk about your husband. Tell us about him. Tell us about his career, and whatever you feel comfortable talking about.
No, I very willingly don't mind speaking about him and his life. It's a good thing to talk about his life. For quite a few years, I wasn't able to. But now it's very helpful to talk about him and to talk positively about him. Peter, yes, he always wanted to be an NYPD police officer, and he became an NYPD police officer. He was living his dream. He started out in Queens. Later on, he wound up going to Queens Task Force, where he had his wonderful partner, Jock, and continued on. He became a sergeant. Wound up in Brooklyn South Narcotics. Unfortunately, he did get hurt there. And he wound up at the 6-2 precinct, which is a neighboring precinct for where we live.
In some respects, his career mirrored mine. I got promoted to sergeant, and I wound up getting hurt. And I had what turned out to be a severe hand and wrist injury, although at the time I thought it was just a sprain. And from what I read, he had an injured hand, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly that. He had gone in on, I think, some kind of bust, and he wound up, when he got in, he wound up breaking his hand. And with the hand, he had all kinds of atrophy and everything else, and he was in an agony, and it was his left hand. He was a lefty. With that, the doctors, physical therapy, the whole works, and he still had no feeling in his hand. When he had gone to the board to try and get out on 3/4, and they deferred him, which, he came home and he was bummed out, and I said, listen, they deferred you. I said, God willing, you'll feel better. And it's not. It's deferred for 6 months, and we'll see how it is then. it took, I guess it bothered him some because he wound up losing all his night differential, his overtime, his second job.
Right.
So, in hindsight, afterwards, the phone calls started coming in, and I saw where, we were struggling. We would have gotten back on our feet, of course, but if he thought that this was the way of saving the family, he was so wrong, because the money never came about, and I still struggle, and emotionally, and for my children also.
Right. And I'm right-handed. This is my strong hand, as I say, or gun hand. I had 3 surgeries, 2 steel plates put in, and people wouldn't know to look at me because I'm so used to this that I'm physically disabled. And not only did it play the physical part, but it really messed with my psyche. And it wasn't just so much that injury, it was how it happened and all the cumulative violence that I experienced over my career, that it really began to mess with me, and it began to mess with, and I'm kind of here confessing, which I never do, and it began to mess with my ability to have a relationship with my spouse, my children, and our relationship started deteriorating. My career was on the rocks. I was being retired. I was 33, and I hate to say this, I can see a point where for some of these people it becomes an option, and it's not a good option. It's a horrible option. Yes,
and I really think that that's what was in his head, is that it's my gun hand, and unfortunately he used his right hand when he made that decision. But I could definitely see where it messed with his head, and he just felt that he didn't have a career to go back to when the time would have been. I don't know what he was thinking.
Nothing about it's logical. It's all twisted. It's all messed up. It's happened so frequently. I read an article preparing for our interview that you did with the Daily Beast and dailybeast.com. And I'm going to be honest with you, MaryAnn, it brought me to tears. I want people in the radio world, in the podcast world, to think I'm a tough guy. I really do. I couldn't. And there's nothing about this story that is not a sucker punch right in the solar plexus. It's impossible to not respond emotionally to the story of what you and Peter went through, and then everything afterwards, because there's a huge part of the story is after. Yes,
and yes, I know. And, that's the reason why I'm here today, because I want men and women that are struggling to hear what the family goes through. Because at that moment, whatever you're thinking, if they could remember what I say and I bring to them, I hope I could help somebody to refocus somehow, some way. I really do. And, in 2019, I'm sure everyone is aware, NYPD went through a terrible, terrible loss of police officers to suicide.
And we're going to take a short break. We're talking with MaryAnn McGinnis. This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. A very powerful conversation about the death of her husband via suicide. This is the Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Facebook has an estimated 3 billion active users all across the planet? Want to increase your presence and profit using Facebook? Learn how you can do that every day, like I do. Plus, you can earn revenue from Meta every month. All this without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com, letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Breakfast with Champions is the tool I use in the morning to get myself ready to face the world. There is so much negativity as you move about your day, from traffic to politics. The conversations are motivating and inspiring, and I can face the world with a positive attitude. So join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join us soon. Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Return conversation with MaryAnn McGinnis on the Law Enforcement Show. MaryAnn's husband, NYPD Sergeant Peter McGinnis, died by suicide. This is a problem that's been going on for a very long time. And I got to warn you right now, this is a very difficult conversation for me to have. And I've had many guests on the show whose spouses have died by suicide. I've had many who were killed in line of duty. And, you know, there's a very gray line, in my opinion, a thin line, a blurry line separating the two. Because a lot of these men and women, they come on the job in a certain state of mind and state of health, and by the time their career is over, they're all scarred up one way or the other. And many of them that die by suicide is directly impacted by three things: post-traumatic stress, substance abuse that goes along with it, challenges to their career status, and will go hand in hand with that, their personal relationships, their marital status. When all those kind of like collide, quite often, this is the end result.
Yes.
So before we went to break, you're talking about 2019 in the NYPD, and it was a disastrous year for deaths by suicide.
And every single time, I swear there were days, and it just hit me every single time. And just to go back a little bit, I wound up getting involved with the NYPD Anchor Club, which is a beautiful organization, and they help the widows and children by bringing them on different events throughout the year. And when my husband passed, let's face it, the way that he did, I wasn't, welcome. Not that I wasn't welcome. I wasn't invited to events with the NYPD, and I understand. I don't understand, but whatever. But the Anchor Club doesn't see line of duty or non-line of duty. They just welcome the widows and the children to these events. So I was blessed by meeting this organization, and I've been involved with them, and going back about 5 years, I wound up becoming the widow liaison for the Anchor Club. With this, the deputy, at a Christmas event, I met the new deputy inspector of employee relations. And I introduced myself. I said, hello, nice to meet you. And he came back to me and said, MaryAnn, we've met before. And not realizing, because those were dark days for me, not realizing he was part of the SBA union, and he was at my house numerous times trying to figure everything out and trying to help my family. I just didn't place him. And from that moment on, he's probably saying, oh, boy, I shouldn't have reminded her, because I do. I call him often, and I speak with him often, and he became a very dear friend to me. And every single time someone took their life in 2019, I would text him, and he goes, I was waiting for this text. I was waiting for it. I knew you'd be on it. And at that point, I reached out to him and said, something's got to be done. He said, and they are. They revamped the NYPD. They're out there helping in a lot of ways. They really are. I have to give it to them for that. And I said, but I understand that you're doing it that way, and the people that you have went to school for this, and they're educated, and, they're giving you textbook info. I want to speak. I said, I want to go to these precincts. I want to go to the organizations, and I want them to hear what it does to a family. And he said, well, if you're willing, let's do it. And I started speaking at the organizations, and, it felt good in a sense, because for years that I would go to these Anchor Club functions, I would be with other widows, and they would always ask me, oh, your husband passed. How did he pass? And all I would say was, he was sick, and I would leave it at that. Because you're talking, this is 2002. You didn't speak those words, and you didn't know suicide. And, I didn't even know how to explain it. I still don't know how. I couldn't tell you why. And that's all I would say was he was sick. And I kind of felt bad, because I wasn't able to say that he died by suicide. But again, it was just unspoken of. And so now I'm out there, and because it was so rampant that year, I'm able to speak, and I'm able to say My husband did die by suicide, but he's still my hero in his own kind of way.
Absolutely. And we have a saying, it's not how they died that makes them heroes. It's how they lived and how they served. And that's the thing that we tend to forget. I got to be honest with you, MaryAnn, when I was a rookie police in 1980, we weren't talking about this. And it was horrifyingly epidemic back then. And it was a nationwide problem. And departments have been sweeping it under the rug for a very, very long time. They've gotten better about being proactive about dealing with these things. But what's missing from the conversation quite often is two things. Number one, recognizing the service of the departed. Yes. And number two, the impact and the stories of the survivors, meaning you and your children.
Yes. And, I remember back then, here's my parents, they don't know what to do, how to help. All they're worried about, she has 3. My daughter was 1. The boys were 4 and 5. I was left holding a bag. And, main thing, they kept me on life insurance at first, but that didn't last. I had to, start paying for my health insurance. And I get it because, I remember back then them saying, I'm sorry, but this is how it is because we don't want more guys to think, oh, this is a way to take care of their family. And, I do get it. I do. But I was still there and struggling. And, again, like I said, these widows, God bless them. God bless them. No one should ever be. They were able to go to functions and feel the NYPD around them and still feel that they were part of it. I wasn't. And it was so difficult. My children didn't know how their father died. And as much as I tried to keep the NYPD and the positiveness about my husband, it was difficult because I didn't have, them so much. Thank God for the Anchor Club. I could never thank them enough for what they did, and they kept my children to see. Look what a beautiful organization the NYPD is, and police officers, and look how they stand by you. And I'll be honest, though, through the years, I've met more people in the department, and now speaking, they love that I'm doing this, and they appreciate it.
And I for one, I find it admirable. I'm very honored to have you on to talk about this because it is such a difficult, traumatic thing, A, to go through, which thank God I haven't had to go through that, but B, to be able to turn around and talk about it in the attempts to try to save other people's lives and families from going through what you had to go through and are still going through today. This is the Law Enforcement Show. I'm going to take a short break. We'll be right back. There's a couple ways you can stay in touch and keep informed of what's going on with the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Number one, go to our website, letradio.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's real easy to find. I promise we don't spam you. I send out about one email every 2 weeks or so. And there's also a feature called broadcast channels on our Facebook page where we send messages directly to your inbox, directly to your messenger. Real easy to sign up for. Make sure you like or follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And up top, you'll see broadcast channels, one for free podcast versions of the radio show, another one top post of the day. So you too can stay informed quickly, easily, and best of all, like always, free.
Did you know that there are people earning $30,000 or more per month from Meta or Facebook? Did you know that you can too? All without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Back to our conversation with MaryAnn McGinnis on the Law Enforcement Show. We're talking about the death of her husband by suicide, NYPD Sergeant Peter McGinnis, and the effects it's had on her and her children, and her mission to try to prevent law enforcement first responder suicide. It's also a huge problem with our military veteran community as well. Before the break, we're talking about your efforts with the Anchor Club and what you've been doing ever since. And I believe just in the news today, there was a NYPD who died by suicide. And it happens in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. It happens in small towns. It happens in precinct buildings. It happens everywhere. And I hate to say this, it's almost even more alarming the amount of retirees that do this, that are 2-3 years retired, that no one even talks about that at all because they separate from the job, they're done, they think life is going to be great, they have nothing but free time, and life doesn't turn out to be so great. That wasn't the case for you. And let's go back to the day. Whatever details you can tell us about the day, be greatly appreciated. And by the way, if you don't want to go into a lot of details, that's totally understandable as well also.
No, people should hear. So the day was great. My husband and I, when we first got married, I always wanted to have a boy first. I don't know why. I just always wanted a boy first. And I was lucky enough to have my son, TJ. And then shortly after, I wanted him to have a best friend. And I was lucky enough, and I wound up with Jonathan, and he got his best friend. But then a little time went by, and I wanted the little girl. And I don't know if I was just lucky or research or books or what have you. I was blessed. We were blessed with a little girl. And she was 1 year old when this happened. And it breaks my heart because I wish that she had memories of him. You know, at least my boys have some memories of him. So the morning we got up, and it was my best friend Valerie's birthday, and it's Jolie's godmother. And I got ready, and I was taking the boys to school. So I put Jolie in her little car seat. She came for the ride. We went to school, dropped the boys off, and we decided we were going to take Val for lunch, the girls, you know, the PTA. And I came back home, and I said, hey, hon, could you just drive me to the store real quick? I want to get her something to bring her, and then just drop me off for lunch. So he says, yeah, sure, no problem. And looking back, the only thing that I saw strange was that he got ready really quick. So we went to the store, and I ran in, and I'll never forget coming out and watching him play, jiggling a toy, I think it was his keys even, in front of her as she was in the car seat, just happy, just content, sitting there. And I wish that she could remember that, because that was the last time that she was with him. But I make her remember by my memories. And he dropped me off for lunch. And as girls always do, we talked too much, and I was late to get the boys from school. So I was calling his phone, and he wasn't answering. Luckily enough, all the women had minivans, and I jumped in a minivan, and we picked up the boys, and I even picked up a play date that day. It was a Friday. And we came home, and I put Power Rangers on for the boys to watch. I put Jolie in her car seat, and she just sat there, always such a good baby. And I ran upstairs to change. And as I'm upstairs, there's all these envelopes on my bed, and I'm going, oh, wow, look at him. You know, he always liked to spoil me and the kids. He was always generous and warm, and I'm thinking to myself, what did he do now? You know, he always thought of bringing me a little something. I said, he probably got me like a gift certificate for my nails or my hair. And I opened one envelope, and the letters to my son, and I start reading it, and I go, you know, I couldn't understand it. And then I open another one, and it's to my other son. And I'm getting nervous, and I'm calling his cell phone, but his cell phone is downstairs ringing. And now I'm on the house phone. I'm calling, my mom and dad were out in Long Island. I'm calling 911. I'm calling people off of his phone, trying to get in touch with anybody as to what's going on. And they were all letters. It was to my girlfriend Val and her husband, one from my mother and father, my 3 kids, and myself. And I just didn't know what was going on. And I'm running around, and I don't even know what to do. And until I went outside, and I got to my curb when the police chaplain pulled up. And I'll never forget it. nobody said anything. They didn't have to. And I just fell to the floor, and I knew it was too late. And the chaos just broke loose, and the amount of people and police officers and friends, thank God for family and friends. And I know my parents couldn't get to me right away. They actually gave them a police escort to get in, and it just changed my world. It just changed my world, and yeah.
How old was Peter when this happened?
Peter was 37.
And how old were you when this happened?
I was 35.
And your kids, you said the boys were 4 and 5, and your daughter was a year old.
Yes.
So it's safe to say they're all young adults now?
Yeah, 25, gonna be 24, and gonna be 20.
So when you got outside, first of all, MaryAnn, I can't imagine the panic. I've never gone through anything that would give me a point of reference to understand and have a comprehension of what that's like. And the only term I can come up with is panic, because it's obvious what happened. But when we tend to think, here's what I do. When it's obvious what's happened, I'm still trying to think, well, maybe this or maybe that, or what if this, or hey, we could do what? And it's, it's desperation. But when you see the police chaplains show up,
yeah,
it's like being hit with a sledgehammer. I don't know if you're military and the military show up at your door. If you're police and police show up at your door, it's usually really, really bad. And it's like confirmation that the worst thing possible could have happened. I don't know how to ask this. How do you breathe in and out when something like that's happening?
I have to be honest with you. I couldn't. I couldn't. The ambulance was parked in front of my house, well, down the block from my house, for about 4 days, because the panic, and they had put me on oxygen, of course, but the panic, the hyperventilating, I think I lost 50 pounds in a day. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't breathe. All I did was cry. My poor parents, to see, your kids going through that. And then my children, because you don't even know what to say to them, why I'm this upset. I couldn't speak. It wasn't until my family got there and we, who was taking care of the kids upstairs, we came up with that Dad died in a car accident, because you can't explain suicide to an adult, let alone a child. That was the story that we were with for a while. And, it wasn't until years later that, the boys got older and they started going on the computer, and being a small neighborhood, people did know how Peter died, and kids did know, but my kids didn't. And I felt the need that I finally did tell the boys. We're
going to talk about that when we return. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. We're joined by MaryAnn McGinnis. Her husband, NYPD Sergeant Peter McGinnis, died by suicide. And there's no way to sugarcoat this conversation. It's a tough one, but it's one that needs to be had. If you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for @LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, @LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. I'm going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Think of Facebook as the world's largest marketing platform, and most of their features are free. Facebook has more than 3 billion users worldwide, and more than 68% of them use the platform every day. Learn how to work smarter and get maximum engagement. Plus, many people can earn a monthly income from Meta. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
This is Law Enforcement Show, back with our guest, MaryAnn McGinnis. MaryAnn's husband, Peter McGinnis, was an NYPD sergeant who died by suicide, and he was 37 when he took his life, and you were 35, correct?
Yes.
And you've got two sons, 4 and 5. You had a 1-year-old daughter, and before in the break, MaryAnn, you're talking about eventually you had a story that you told the kids because it's easier to explain that he died in a car accident. But there came an age where they could, with the internet and else, they could figure out on their own, and you had to break it to them. How does someone, first of all, I don't know how you broach the subject of, we got to go on with our life as a family after this. I don't get it. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say, even to this point, and it didn't happen to me. And then you can decide to have this conversation with your children.
Yep.
How do you broach that subject?
You know what? I did it to protect them, not to cause more craziness in that was going on. And but like I said, people in the neighborhood knew, and I didn't want them to hear it from someone else. So I'll never forget the day, and my mother was just supportive as usual, but was also very, hesitant and didn't want it to bring me back to that dark hole. And I said, Mom, it's something I have to do. And, that's basically how I lived my life was it's me only, and I have to take care of these children, and I'm going to do the best that I can. So I brought them to their room, and Jolie was still probably only 5. And I brought the boys upstairs, and I sat them down. I said, listen, we have to talk. Nothing, you did nothing wrong, but I have to tell you something about your dad. He had something broken inside of him. It's not like an arm or a leg. You could see that. And when you see that, you fix it. I said, but this is something inside of him between his heart and his brain. And I couldn't see it, and I couldn't fix it. Because if I could have, I would have. I said, and that Dad, took his life. That's how Daddy really did die. And we cried, and my mother cried, and I said, but this it doesn't matter how he died. We love him, and we were lucky we had him for as long as we did. I was lucky because I have you guys, and I took them out to his favorite restaurant, and we celebrated their dad's life.
You're making me tear up right now just talking about it. And look, I'm a father. My daughters are adults, and I'm not going to do what some people I'm sure have done. I'm not going to go into the why. And people love to look for motives and explanations. And all I can say is this, and I've said it before, in law enforcement, in the first responder world, here's what I know for certainty. There's so many officers who die by suicide. There's a triad of things that occur. One is post-traumatic stress, and it usually a result of cumulative violence and cumulative trauma, not just one incident, although it oftentimes the last incident is a straw that broke the camel's back. And with that comes substance abuse issues, not all the time, but often. But also really what happens is there is a beginning of an isolation from their family where they don't feel like they're part of. They feel like they're a burden, that they're not making things better. They're making things worse. They wind up in a situation where their job, they're either being retired, forced to retire, or in disciplinary action. And when all those collide, quite often, these men and women, my brothers and sisters, will resort to suicide. And it's as predictable as the day is long. And you think we'd get better at dealing with this and preventing it. And in some ways we have. And I think you telling your story is a big help. But man, there's a whole lot more that needs to be done.
Yep. Yes, there is.
Well, one of the things I tell people, if you're going to go into law enforcement nowadays, we all have a general practitioner we see once a year for a physical. It's a good idea to have a physical every year. It's a good idea to have a dentist and go for a routine dental exam every year. And it's a really good idea if you're in law enforcement, no matter where you work, small town department, rural department, or big city, go to a therapist who is trained in trauma once a year to be proactive.
I agree.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm getting off my soapbox because it's not a comfortable spot to be in.
No, unfortunately, I did the best that I could to explain it to the boys, and unfortunately, I had to relive it again. And it wasn't over there because I still had Jolie. And when Jolie turned, I guess, 15, I don't know what was going on, but I remember the day she was on the couch, and I said to her, you know, Joel, maybe it's time I got to tell you something. So she said, what, Mom? So I said, Daddy didn't die in a car accident. I said, Daddy took his life years ago, and I'm telling you now because I want you to hear it from me. Well, it broke my heart because that little girl that I thought I was protecting all these years went hysterical, and I couldn't understand it. And I said to her, but Joel, I said, listen, I know. I said, but honey, we were so lucky to have him as long as we did. I said, he was hurt inside. And she just was, I couldn't console her. And she finally said to me, Mommy, I'm crying because for all these years, she said, I thought Daddy died in a car crash and it was my fault. So I said, but why would you think that? She says, because I was a baby and I figured that I was crying all night long and I would keep him up at night. And that's how he got into the car crash, because he fell asleep.
Oh, I hate to ask this. How are the kids doing now?
My kids are good.
That's a testament to you, by the way. That's a testament to you and your family.
Yeah. No, they're good. I mean, you know, there's always going to be something that will trigger it and make it sad. But I always tell them, you know, to think positive. And he's always there. He's always with us. You just have to take the time to feel him and think of him. You know, I truly believe pennies from heaven. And it's funny because whenever we see a penny in the street, it could be two-way traffic, and I stop and get that penny because I know he wants to talk. And I talk, and we that's, you know, I always make it a point to do that, because you got to believe in something, and you got to take the time, and life gets away, and you know, I always try to make sure that I fill him in on the day. And not every day is a good conversation. Sometimes I'm off at him,
yeah.
You know.
But you've kind of made this your mission now to be a spokesperson and to be proactive and do your part by telling your story to try to prevent these from happening in other families.
100%.
And you work, was it the Anchor Club you work with?
Yes, I work with the NYPD Anchor Club, and that's my second family, I tell you. And they're very supportive with what I'm doing now also because, you know, like I said, not many people did know. And I just well, you know what? I was very busy raising 3 little ones, so I couldn't help in any other kind of way. But, you know, thank God they're all big and doing their things. And it just came to me, and I said, you know what? Maybe it's time that I start speaking and people hear the heartbreak and the story.
I think, you know, and I'm not a therapist, I'm not peer support counselor, and I think that by you telling your story, it might offer a little bit of a purpose for you and what you've been through, and maybe a little bit of healing.
100%. Because like I said, you know, for so many years, I didn't speak about it, and I didn't say anything. And I have to be honest with you, there wasn't even much out there that would help, because I'm sure it were organizations, but it wasn't spoken of. I'll never forget going to a grievance meeting, and I sat there with women that were 80 years old that lost their husbands to cancer or to heart attacks, and I'm sitting there, 35 years old. I said, this isn't for me. They can't even understand what I'm going through. They don't even know.
MaryAnn, I'm so thankful that you came on the show to tell your story. I'm very thankful that you are doing what you're doing. And if you ever make your way to Florida, we certainly, my wife and I and you and kids or whatever, have to get together for lunch or coffee or something. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I hope it helps someone.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.